Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear students, in this lecture, we are going to discuss the coagulation cascade, involving the more complex mechanisms like extrinsic and intrinsic mechanisms. Our story will begin from the injury site. Initially, the platelet plug formation takes place. As I have already told you that vasoconstriction locally and other chemical substances released locally, they are very helpful in coagulation process. If the bleeding stops, then further coagulation mechanisms not take place and not participate. But if the bleeding persists, then other clotting factors, other mechanisms, they are initiated and help the blood vessel to stop the bleeding. So, how the coagulation process initiated? As already discussed about the 4 points related to the coagulation, including the local vasoconstriction extra, and then we have the platelet plug formation. With that, we must consider that whenever there is injury to the blood vessel or there is bleeding, it may be external bleeding or internal bleeding, so that on that basis we can have two main clotting mechanism, extrinsic mechanism and intrinsic mechanism. The main difference is that if the injury is to the tissues surrounding the blood vessel or the vascular wall, the first mechanism which is initiated, that is called the extrinsic mechanism. As now, in case that we have the injury from outside, and if there is trauma to the blood itself, direct trauma to the blood itself or the vessel wall, then the intrinsic pathway will be initiated. Later on, we will discuss all these and find it that both these mechanisms, they combine at some stage and the end is the same for extrinsic or intrinsic pathway. Anyhow, the end result of both these mechanisms is the formation of prothrombin activator. Once the prothrombin activator is there, it converts the prothrombin into thrombin, and then the fibrin threads, they stabilize the clot. This is the whole story. So, initially, either the trauma to the tissues surrounding the blood vessels or involving the vessel wall, then it is the extrinsic mechanism that will be initiated firstly. If the trauma is to the direct to the blood or the vessel wall is common for both extrinsic and intrinsic mechanisms. So, if the direct trauma to the blood or the vessel wall, the intrinsic mechanism that is initiated. As a result of both, prothrombin activator is formed, which converts prothrombin into thrombin. The extrinsic mechanism of the blood coagulation is named so because in addition to components present in the blood, it also needs tissue factor derived from many extravascular cells or from the outside the blood vessel. As far as the extrinsic mechanism is concerned, trauma to the blood vessel or the tissue take place. Then tissue thromboplastin converts factor 10 to activator 10 factor. For that you can appreciate this animation, how the factor 10 is activated in the presence of tissue factor, this one tissue factor, and factor 7A, that is the activated factor 7. In the presence of activated 7 and the tissue factor, the factor 10 that is activated in case of extrinsic mechanism. So overall, the extrinsic mechanism starts with the formation of the tissue factor, which converts the factor 7 into factor 7A, and with the 7A and tissue factor in that presence, the factor 10 is activated so that prothrombin activator is formed, which converts the prothrombin into thrombin. So this is a very important step in which factor 10 is activated, and you must remember it because in the following slides I will tell you again its importance, why it is so important step. As far as the intrinsic mechanism is concerned, it is named as intrinsic mechanism because all factors taking part in this system are derived from the blood itself, and it can take place in pure blood, that is blood not contaminated with tissue juice, kept in a test tube also. It is also called contact system because the process starts when blood comes in contact with a foreign surface, for example vascular endothelial collagen or even glass. And this may be asked in Viva from you, and the question is, when you do the practical performance regarding the clotting time, we have the capillary action, blood in the capillary, in which the blood coagulation take place. And the question is, which mechanism is involved in blood coagulation in capillary, glass capillary? So the answer is intrinsic mechanism. As the blood comes in contact with the glass surface, it starts clotting. You may be confused with that one, that the answer may be the extrinsic mechanism as the clotting is taking place outside the body. No, this is not the reason. Actually, the extrinsic mechanism involves the tissue factor which is released from the injured tissues or the blood vessel wall. If the coagulation process starts from the tissue factor, then it will be labeled as extrinsic mechanism. If the coagulation starts from the trauma itself or the blood comes in contact with the glass surface, the mechanism which is involved in coagulation, that is the intrinsic mechanism. The injury damages platelets which release phospholipids. The phospholipids along with the high molecular weight, kinogens and calcrin converts factor 12 into 12A, which starts the intrinsic mechanism. This is a very short steps of the intrinsic mechanism. It has many other steps also and much more complicated than this one. I will show you later on also this one. You can see how much the complex intrinsic mechanism, which 12 converted into 12A, 11 into 11A and so on. And again, this is the step in which we have the involvement of the extrinsic pathway also. This is the common stage at which the intrinsic and extrinsic pathways, they combined, they meet each other and then go together to form to convert the prothrombin into thrombin. So the activation of factor 10, that is the common step for intrinsic and extrinsic pathway, and after that the formation of thrombin take place from the prothrombin. From this figure you can appreciate one more thing, that intrinsic pathway involves so many factors and also so much long pathway involving much more time, but as compared to the extrinsic pathway, it is very short. To have a comparison, I will give you a tabulated form also. In short, in stage 1 we have the generation of prothrombin activator. After that, the formation of thrombin from the prothrombin take place, after which the fibrin threads, they are formed from the fibrinogen. This is the tabulated form showing the comparison of extrinsic with the intrinsic pathway. As I have told you that extrinsic pathway, that is site of injury, either the blood vessel or the tissue present outside the blood vessel, while here the blood vessel or the direct trauma to the blood. Duration, that is just 10 to 15 seconds, as it is very short, while the intrinsic has a long pathway involving much more factors and time. So the extrinsic involve few steps, fast, explosive, only just involving the 3 stages, while intrinsic is very much complex, involve many coagulation, clotting factors, and it is very slow. It is a 5-stage program. So in these animations, I want to show you how the prothrombin is converted into thrombin and then further story. In the presence of prothrombin activator, prothrombin changes into thrombin. This is the conversion of prothrombin into thrombin. At the site, now the process that is going on, more and more platelets, they are involved, they are coming on contact with the injured site. The thrombin which is formed now coming to the site to join the newly formed platelet plug formation. A platelet plug which is going to be formed at the site. So more complex mechanisms, they are involved and thrombin is joining, and more factors, they are also joining the injured site. So the next step is the clot formation. For that purpose, you can see all the other factors, thrombin, and they are coming contacts in, and the platelet, they are coming in contact with the injured side, and there the fibrinogen is converted into fibrin threads to strengthen. You can see the fibrinogen is converted into fibrin, joining to form the fibrin thread and giving strength to the newly formed clot at the injured site. So question of the day is number 1. Which pathway is better than the other and why? Answer is, I have already told you that the intrinsic pathway is better than the extrinsic. Extrinsic pathway is better than the intrinsic as it involves very few clotting factors, it involves very few steps, it is explosive and completed within seconds as compared to the intrinsic pathway, which is a very long pathway and involves many other factors. If by chance any factor that is deficient, the whole pathway that is going to be stopped as compared to the extrinsic pathway, which is completed very soon within seconds and involve very few clotting factors. So the answer is the extrinsic pathway is better than the intrinsic one as it involves few steps and clotting factors. The second question about this mechanism is that at which step both mechanisms combine. So the answer is the step in which the factor 10 is activated from its factor 10. This is the common pathway, and then the next step, that is the formation of prothrombin activator, which it is going to convert the prothrombin into thrombin and so on. That is the common. So the step in which the factor 10 is activated, that is the common step. Dear student, this is the time at which I should explain the importance of the calcium. As you can see that in the extrinsic and intrinsic both pathways, almost at each step the calcium ions, they should be there, they are needed. So what is the importance of the calcium? In our body, the calcium is not only needed for the clotting mechanism, but it has other functions also, like building strong bones and teeth, sending and receiving nerve signals, squeezing and relaxing muscles, releasing hormones and other chemicals, keeping a normal heartbeat. At this stage, I am telling you the function of calcium because it may be asked in Viva. So you must know what are the functions of the calcium ion. Some of these functions we have already studied, and other functions we will study later on in other units and other topics and the headings of other topics. But here you must know what are the functions of the calcium. Almost all of the calcium in the body is stored in the bone. As far as its sources they are concerned, we must know that good sources of calcium include dairy foods like milk, yogurt and cheese, calcium fortified foods such as soy products, and to a lesser degree some leafy green vegetables and nuts and seeds. So students, with that we have completely covered the extrinsic and intrinsic pathway of the clotting mechanism and also have a good knowledge about the calcium ions. So with that we complete our today's lecture. Thank you and Allah Hafiz.